It's the last days, church. We're in those birth pains. What we talked about last Sunday. We're feeling those birth pains. The end is getting close. And there's soon going to be a trumpet sound. And the church is going to check out of this place and leave behind all of the stress and the stress. But as long as we're here, let us be about our Father's business. Amen. Before about Ronald Reagan, back in 1978, it's called Letters by His Own Hand. He wasn't the president at the time. He was the governor of California. And I've got an excerpt that I want to share with you this morning from that book. Once there was a great nation founded by pilgrims who decided to leave their own country, which didn't recognize religious freedom. They migrated to an uncivilized land inhabited only by savages. The rock where they landed was to become a national shrine. They drove off the natives, built rude shelters and houses of worship, setting aside a special day to give thanks. These pilgrims believed in their God, and they also believed in work. They established schools and in a way became the first public education in the free world. Other colonists came and established their communities. Eventually they built large cities using Greek architecture. Some of the noblest words ever written began to surface. Such words as liberty, justice, and freedom of worship. Then an older nation sent tax agents to exploit the colonists. The colonists sent their greatest representatives to a general assembly, choosing a gentleman farmer as their leader. He united them and won the war against the old world. The farmer is known as the father of the country. Today, a famous U.S. city is named after him. Ultimately, the country was divided. A civil war divided the fledgling country. Its leaders, who tried to keep the republic united, was assassinated. His murder has been immortalized by one of the greatest playwrights of all time. After the wounds of the bloody Civil War were healed, the nation became a world power. Next, the civilians began to think of security paid for by tax money. Farmers petitioned for price support. The government bought up crops and stored them in warehouses. Industrialists were next, asking for tax benefits. The middle class declined under the added tax burden. Crime became so commonplace it was dangerous to walk the streets at night. A crippled man led the nation into the war of foreign entanglements. A general who had been victimized by the government pleaded with the nation to return to the principles of their founding fathers. He died bitterly, thinking his anguishing thoughts. An honest senator dared to speak out for the halt of foreign aid and foreign subversion. He was branded a reactionary. The nation fell deeper into debt. It joined the League of the World. It increased taxes, devalued its currency by substituting base materials for its silver and its coins. Can I tell you this morning that what you saw on the screen was not the country that most of you are thinking it was? Because it wasn't America that Ronald Reagan was writing about, but the ancient city of Rome. The country of Rome went through everything that I just spoke to you about, and yet it parallels in every way the story of the country that you and I call home. As a matter of fact, the facts that I had on this board, Rome was totally corrupt. By the time it fell, it was absolutely corrupt throughout and within. Its middle class was dead. Barbarians had moved into the country and destroyed the civilizations. Here's what we talked about on the wall. The rock where the Romans first settled is called Pilgrim's Rock. It is now the foundation of the Temple of Jupiter. The gentleman farmer that the U.S. city was named after was Cincinnatus. The assassinated leader that most of you probably thought was Abraham Lincoln was Julius Caesar. The crippled leader was Caligula. The general was Mark Antony. The honest senator was Cicero, and Shakespeare was the playwright that immortalized that story. America has been a great nation since it was founded. I don't know of how much the United States history you're familiar with, but since our inception, since we won the right to be a country through the Revolutionary War, we have been a great nation. But after World War II, we became a world superpower. After we won that war, we solidified our mark in this country, or in this world, as a great country. But what people don't know, and I'm going to get into this in just a little bit, what people fail to realize when they only look on the national and the humanity side of things, and they refuse to see the spiritual side of things. What people don't realize is how prophecy affects the day that we're living in. Because no one stays great forever. And if you look at the cycles of humanity and the civilizations, what I just showed you on this wall was what happened to Rome, but it's also what's happening to the United States. And what we don't realize is that we're not great just because we're a democracy or because we want our freedom. We're great because God's had favor on us. We're great because He's blessed us. And every 250 years of human history, there has been a shift in power. And what people that don't see, all they see is the natural side of things. They don't see that every 250 years there's been a shift from the east to the west or from the north to the south. No country stays great forever. And the United States has actually had 400 years of greatness. And we have been a leading power since the 40s. And we have actually outstayed our welcome as the top dog. I don't know if, and this is hard as an American for me to say, but when you go back and read what happened to the Medes, the Persians, the Romans, what happened to the Chinese, the Mongols, what happened to these countries was after 250 years, somebody else that was bigger and badder came along and took their... I'll get into that in a minute. What I wanted to say is, if we don't have the favor of God, church, we're going to go under. We will never be what we once were. Just because we fly the stars and stripes don't make us great. No country stays great without God's hand being upon them. We have got to have the Lord. Amen. Build tanks and trains and airplanes, but that won't matter if God's favor is not with us. Let's look at all the coincidences. And this is just, hey, I could go on for 15 minutes about the parallels between American